The Polyglot Gathering is organized by Education at Internet.
Hello, everybody. It's 1 minute past 12, so it's time to start already. After the presentation, as always, we will use Slido for the questions. So please, if you want to ask questions after the presentation, just scan the QR code and type the questions in Slido. Please welcome Werner, and we shall begin.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thank you. Now towards the end of the Polyglot, slightly more controversial, maybe even political topic. A few disclaimers at the beginning. I'm not a linguist, so nothing here is going to be scientific in any way. It's all only based on my personal experience with the languages that I speak, which makes the workshop also very Eurocentric because unfortunately I understand only European languages. And so we're trying to be inclusive on one front and super chauvinist on another front, unfortunately. Also, I don't have any solutions, so if you're hoping for that, then feel free to take an early lunch break. What is the problem? The problem is that we're living in the 21st century and we want to have equality and we want to have inclusivity. And we're stuck with languages that are inherently patriarchal and binary. Now, the problem is much older than we might assume. This text here is by Mark Twain, the American author who, as some of you might know, was a fluent German speaker. And he wrote an essay that I recommend to anybody who has ever had anything to do with German. It's called The Awful German Language. Just Google it and you will find the entire essay. It's a humoristic approach on grammar and syntax issues of German. And he quoted this, like at the end of the 19th century. He complained about the fact that, as most European languages actually, German gives a gender to inanimate objects. So like we say he to the table, and we say she to the door, and it to the window. And it's sometimes really, really, really not logical at all. And also, as he says, like disrespectful, because he noticed that the girl in German is neutral, while the turnip is feminine. So he translated this little dialogue here between Gretchen and Wilhelm. Wilhelm, where is the turnip? She has gone to the kitchen. But then Gretchen asks, where is the accomplished and beautiful English maiden? It has gone to the opera, yeah? So we see that the problem is much older than we might think. Already 150 years ago, people were aware of it. The other thing that we see is, sometimes in the discussion nowadays, you can hear people say something like, yeah, grammatical gender and biological sex or sociological gender, they have nothing in common. Well, not quite, right? Mark Twain was aware of the fact that it's weird that the girl was supposed to be it. Otherwise, he would have said, yeah, why not? I mean, if the genders were just completely random, we wouldn't also have to call them masculine, feminine, neutral. We could just say yellow, blue, and green, and nobody would care whether you would be assigned a yellow gender or a green gender. So English speakers are usually not really aware of the magnitude of the problem. They think by assigning pronouns and assigning the correct pronouns that people wish, everything will be fixed. But we're at a Polyglot conference here, Polyglot gathering, sorry, from misbranding here. I guess most of you are aware that in most languages beyond English, the problem is way bigger. And the fact that we have a binary language mostly penetrates really, really, really deeply into the grammar. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples here from the languages that I speak. As I said before, only European languages, and I'm pushing English a little bit to the side because I assume that everybody here speaks English, otherwise I guess you would already have left the room. So it starts with articles. Articles, obviously when we have a gender, we have an article, and sometimes that's relatively cool still. So in French, we can at least say le prof, la prof. So if we know who we're talking about, then we can assign one of two genders. There is no more, unfortunately, in French, but at least that works. The problem starts when we're talking about a teacher in general, and we have no clue. Like, should we say la prof? Should we say le prof? Czech just drops the article. That's cool, even though, as you can see, Czech has a long list of other problems. It's really only this where Czech is, quite at an advantage. German and Norwegian, the Germanic languages, are actually relatively cool with the article because at least we can drop them when we have a name, except if you want to go really into details. In South German, we assign an article to people when we use the first name. So that's something you guys do in English, right? You don't know which pronouns you use. You just use somebody's first name and the problem is fixed. Doesn't work in Bavarian dialect, also doesn't work in Northern Norwegian. You would, it's not an article here, that's actually a pronoun. You would say Han Ingve, it's a guy. And who Marita or something, it's a girl. Okay, so much to add to articles. Adjectives. German and Norwegian are cool here. We don't need to change the ending of an adjective when we're describing someone. But in French and Czech, the ending changes. So since Marie is a girl, she is vieille and not vieux. Same in Czech, Marie is stará. It's not stadi, we have to say stará, so we have to choose. And again, we have a choice between two genders. Present perfect participle, I'm going to skip over that in French because even French speakers usually have, it's mostly in the writing, they even mix it up sometimes. But in Czech, if you're a woman, you have to say that you did something, you have to stress that you're a woman. As a guy, I would say dělal jsem to, as a woman, I would say dělala jsem to. And then Czech has something really cool, they have possessive adjectives. So if you want to say something belongs to or is connected to something, you can make an adjective of a noun, but again, completely gendered. So the fact here we are at the Mendelova Universität, and this ending ova tells me that Mendel is a guy and the university is a girl. We have job titles. In English, you think a teacher is really all genders. I'm going to show you that this is not technically true. But in most other languages, we have to choose, again, like écrivaine, that's a woman, écrivain, without the E would be the masculine form. Inženýrka is also a woman. If it was a guy, we would say Ingenieur. And also in German, we have a difference between Ingenieur and Ingenieur. The Scandinavian languages have just one expression per genders, one for all genders, which is quite cool. Though there has been some debate recently about professions that obviously refer to a man, like for example, fylkesmann. Fylkesmann is the highest civil servant at a county in Norway. And the Norwegian government decided a couple of years ago to abolish the fylkesmann, and he's now called statsforvalter, which sounds more gender neutral, even though it's technical and grammatical is still a masculine form. When you address somebody, in English, it's usually first names. In Norwegian also makes things a lot easier. But in German, I think it's slowly vanishing, while in French and Czech, it's still absolutely necessary. If you want to be polite, you have to say Mr. so-and-so, Mrs. so-and-so. And then, of course, you have to choose. Of course, you can go first names, but that's considered a little bit rude. Or you go formal, and then you have to, then it's not really inclusive, right? So you have to choose, do you want to be sexist or do you want to be rude? There is one more interesting sexist and rude. Well, you can say madame and the last name and then use the informal and tutoyer. That would be sexist and rude. There is something interesting in Czech that I struggle with sometimes. When you're married in Czech, if you're a man married to a woman, you're ženatý. It means womanized. Yeah, žena is woman. Ženatý is you're womanized. If you're a woman married to a man, you are vdaná. So notice the adjective endings, but vdaná means given. Quite interesting, right? It's not taken. In English, you're taken when you're in a relationship. In Czech, you're given. I'm married to a man. How do I express that? There is no word. So I always say mužatý, because like I don't want to say vdaný. It's not. I'm not a woman still. So I had to invent a word, and then Czech people don't know what that is, and they ask me, and it's like it's a bit complicated. You have looked at Czech names, I guess. Czech family names do a weird thing. When you are a woman and you get married and you take your husband's name, you get an ending indicating that you belong to this guy. So this is the wife of a Mr. Holák. She will be Mrs. Holáková. I think there is a law now being passed that you don't need to do that anymore as a woman, but I've still never met any woman who doesn't have that. Yeah, we have many other things. We try in languages to be a little bit more neutral and, for example, not say the woman, the man, and we use words like person, człowiek, mensch, human, right? Something like that. But of course, these words are also gendered. So we cannot choose to say die Mensch, for example. It's just not grammatically correct. It sounds weird. And we have the fundamentalists who even discover masculinity in pronouns that at first glance seem very harmless. Like, for example, the German jemand, just someone, and then they realize, well, this Mann, isn't that a man? And there are people nowadays who say je Mensch. It's actually become... Yeah, that's not a joke. I mean, as people are really doing that, of course, they forget that the Mensch is still masculine, so it's not really a lot of progress. Okay, I guess I'll drop the compounds and the plural endings. Some attempts have been made to try to become a little bit more inclusive. Because, as I said before, in Czech you have to choose. Do you want to address a woman? Do you want to address a man? And you have to choose even though you don't know who you are addressing. So if you're talking about people in general, what do? You have a feminine version of this sentence and a masculine one. Protože ti fakt přeje, abys, if you're a woman, byla šťastná a dělala to, co miluješ. So I took that from a Facebook post, actually. It means because he or she, we don't know, we can drop the subject pronoun. That's really cool. Really wishes you that you will be happy and that you will do what you love. But then this guy it was a guy actually, who did this post, he tried to be inclusive, and this is how he did it. And I don't know how to pronounce that. I told you before that Mark Twain was aware of this issue or these issues. I mean, it's a huge complex, right? 150 years ago, it's not like this is a development of the last 10 or 15 years. In German, we have been aware of that even, I would say in the 1950s or 1960s, we realized that women exist. And I'm quoting here a little text that is from a rule book of a company, I think it was a radio station. What they wanted to say is the director appoints or will appoint his or her deputy, and they understood that both the director or the deputy could be, of course, not non-binary. They didn't think of that back then, but they realized that it might be a woman or a man in each, and that gives us a lot of combinations, right? So the male director or the female director appoints his male deputy or his female deputy or her male deputy or her female deputy. One way of doing that. We have come to a point where we should think maybe a little bit about how important all of that is. And I'm doing a little test here because this is a riddle that I have. It's actually an experiment that a Norwegian researcher made with people in the street and also with her class. I translated it from Norwegian, so let's see if it works also in English. But let's see how you guys are going to solve it. So a mother was driving with her little son, hit a tree, died on the spot. The mother, yeah? It's a bit brutal. It's the Nordic countries. This is where all the dark crime novels come from. But the kid was taken to hospital. In the emergency room, one of the nurses screams, "Oh my God, that's my son." How does that add up? Great. So you are you're very sensitive to the topic. It's very easy, actually. Well, the nurse is a man, and the nurse is the kid's father. But I saw a TV documentary, which is about 20 years old now, where they asked people in the street, and they just didn't come up with that conclusion, which is so obvious. So they had an idea that it was a lesbian couple who had adopted, that there is something deeper, that the kids had been mixed up at birth, and it's not actually the nurse's kid. Like really big theories. And what is interesting is that in the original riddle, they used the term sykepleier, which technically is a masculine word, but in Norway, for decades and decades and decades, the feminine professions are not named anymore because they're considered derogatory. So we don't say sykepleierske anymore. For the teacher, we don't say lærerinne anymore. For a writer, we would not say forfatterinne anymore. They would use the masculine as well, because for some odd reason, the feminine endings, they got this connotation of being a little bit derogatory. Like lærerinne, she's not a real teacher. I mean, she's a woman. What does she have to teach? She should learn. It's like women will not, they will regard it as offensive if you call them lærerinne or forfatterinne. So he used the seemingly innocent or gender-neutral term sykepleier, and they still didn't get it, and the explanation was obviously that back then, 20 years ago when they did the experiment, everybody assumed that a nurse is a woman. So the problem might be bigger in the real world than in the grammar, actually. Something a little bit more new. So you had this very long text about the director and the deputy, and what we can do in modern German is shorten the whole thing a bit. And instead of always naming two genders, we just merge them into one word. We have this little star here, and by this little star, we want to express that we include also people who assume that they're non-binary, intersex, whatever. So we want to include all genders. And the problem is a little bit in the pronunciation. Here we say liebe ZuhörerInnen, and here we say liebe ZuhörerInnen. Not sure if you can hear the difference. It's what we call in German Knacklaut. It's the phenomenon in the pronunciation that gives the German language this computerish sound. When we say something like alles ist in Ordnung, like we start every word from scratch, not like the Italians who would say alles ist in Ordnung. So you have to, if you want to say that here, you have to say liebe ZuhörerInnen. Yeah, you have to basically stop the word and start from scratch. The French are not as innovative as you would think. They just stole it from us, and they did it badly, because they don't have this. Of course, they have different endings. Like, what are you going to do with that? Yeah, and how are you supposed to pronounce it? I mean, half of the letters they don't pronounce anyway, and then the ones they do pronounce, they don't add up. Sometimes it adds up. Like with the writers, you can do it. I'm still not sure how you would pronounce it. I mean, maybe there is somebody who knows how to say that, but you have to choose. Either you go écrivain or écrivaine. Yeah, it's difficult. Now the Scandinavians, the Swedes and the Danes, like the original of progress and inclusivity and equality, right? Your Danish teacher is going to tell you this. He's going to tell you, well, we also have two genders, just like the French, but we're not sexist, because we do something very smart. We have a common gender for both men and women and everybody else who wants to be on the spectrum, and then we have a neutral gender that we only use for inanimate objects. Mostly, it's not really true, but still. There is still some confusion with the inanimate objects, because they can be either this common gender or the neutral gender. So like the table would be the neutral gender, and the door would be the common gender. But they say, okay, the table is not going to complain about being discriminated against with the wrong gender. So at least here, yeah, isn't that amazing, right? We managed to merge the genders and have one common gender. It sounds so nice, it's actually not true, and you realize it when you bring Norwegian into the picture, because Norwegian, which is technically the same language, I talked about that on Thursday, Norwegian still has 3 genders, and now you can see that the woman, she suddenly has a different gender. So what happened actually is simply that the feminine gender disappeared. It's not really that there was a new gender that is somehow more neutral or something like that. That is actually also what happens in English mostly. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of it very much, but there are waiters and waitresses, there are actors and actresses, but there is no teacheress and there is no driveress. And it's an interesting question actually, why? My assumption would be that at the time these terms were coined, people could imagine that a woman could work in a restaurant or maybe on a theater stage, but I mean, she wouldn't be teaching or let alone driving, right? So these words simply don't exist. And English has dropped the grammatical gender for many, many centuries, which I think is a good thing, but of course these endings, ER, whenever you see an ER ending and you go back to Old English, you realize it's a masculine ending. Maybe not a big problem, but still. Mr. Macron is very envious of these things because he doesn't know how to fix that in the French language, because obviously, in contrast to the Scandinavians, French, like I think also Spanish, Portuguese, and all the other Romance language, they have just two genders, and they are masculine and feminine. What do you do? So he insists, le masculin, c'est le neutre, the masculine is the neutral form. We know by now that's technically not true at all. His wife knows it also, that's why she hits him. But it's a certain form of resistance, right? How do you react to the ideas of like putting stars everywhere, changing pronouns, and so on? Let's look a little bit of the resistance of language changes, where languages try to be a bit more gender inclusive. And I think some of these objections are pretty legitimate, others maybe not so much. It's ugly. Yes, a language has its inner aesthetic. Try to write poetry in a gender-neutral way. It's not nice, yeah. I showed you before all these examples that I cannot even pronounce, where you put like dots, or you put, it's not, yeah. Even the old German binary with woman and man, and then you have the deputy, and then it goes on and on. It may well be very inclusive, but is it nice? Is it practical? Not really. Is it logical? Well, that's debatable. So some of these approaches, I think, can be quite logical. Others, not so much. But what mostly older people will say, well, I've always used this expression, I've always used that pronoun, I've always only used the masculine, and now suddenly I'm supposed to do something else, and I'm supposed to do the gender star and so on. And I'm not like chauvinist, I'm not, and that's true, and I think it's a problem in general with language change, that the older generation, when the younger generation tells them, hey, this is how you should talk, because otherwise it's bad and you're a bad person, then of course it will meet resistance. People will say, no, I'm not a bad person because I'm using an expression or a way of expressions that, now seemingly is outdated. Some people don't do it because, like, just because, you know, it's this, like the meat eaters, when you tell them the fries are vegan, they don't want to eat them anymore. It's sometimes a little bit like that. But I think there's one aspect that is a little bit underestimated in the discussion, and that is that sometimes I have the feeling that the people who want to do everything right when it comes to this topic, it becomes a little bit of a status symbol. So they want to show that I know all the pronouns, and I know all the correct endings, and I know that even in this one pronoun there is still a man hidden, and I'm going to replace him with something more neutral. Sometimes it might be worth maybe to look more at the problems in the real world. So I told you I have no solutions, and I definitely don't, because I think the languages are just the way they are. But something that I do, I mean, I still have an opinion on the topic, of course. I personally believe a little bit in the middle ground. There are some things that you can do really, really easily, where you can adapt the language in a way that it sounds more inclusive, that it's a bit more open. Sometimes, for example, we have a gender-neutral term, Going back to the teacher, in German we have Lehrer, Lehrerin. We also have Lehrkraft, which is a word that you will find in the dictionary. It's gender neutral. Of course it has a grammatical gender, yes, but it's die Lehrkraft, so why not take women? We've been oppressing women all the time, so we can take a woman for a change, and then we say die Lehrkraft, and we don't know, is this a woman, is this a man, is this somebody non-binary? We have no clue. So some of these things are really simple to do. Other things that you can do when you write a longer text, you can choose your examples a little bit wisely. That's something that every style guide will tell you actually. Don't put the big group, put, like they call it pars pro toto, right? So you don't write, he was cooking, he was cutting the onions. Of course, he was not only cutting the onions, but it creates an image in your head, and so it sounds nicer. In the same way, when you talk about, I don't know, a train driver, you don't say train drivers in the plural, but you can say a train driver. You can choose the feminine form, for example, just for a change, because very often train drivers are not women yet, and so you can like increase this visibility a little bit. Another thing that doesn't look very beautiful, and the reason is that I drew it. I think as language enthusiasts, we also have to accept to a certain degree the limitations of our languages. People say that languages shape the thinking. I would say maybe a little bit, but mostly our thinking shapes the language. So all our languages are history books. All of the idioms we have developed, they have existed for hundreds of years, and mostly we don't even know what they mean anymore, for the simple reason that the context in which they evolved has vanished. And that's, of course, like the languages are chauvinist, yes, because they come from a chauvinist time, because they were developed centuries and centuries ago. And we have to understand that the language is basically only the things that are in the square. We have words, we have expressions, we have grammatical functions, but the concepts that we have in our head is way beyond that, so that's also the scribbles in between. I took that from a Swedish philosopher, by the way, this idea. Her name is Jonna Bornemark. If you want to read more about this concept, then maybe look it up. She said it in another context, of course, but I think that is maybe an approach that would help to take out also the spice from the discussion and rather concentrate a little bit on fixing the problems in the real world and not in the grammar endings. All of this super controversial. What is less controversial is that you should buy my language courses. I've been sponsoring the Polyglot event here for a while, and yeah, if you want to look up this link, I forgot to include a QR code. What I actually do in life is I develop story-based language courses. So there's an absurd story that goes through the entire course, starts super simply and gets more and more complicated. And if you want to learn the language, then you have to, if you want to know how the story ends, then you have to learn the language. There's a discount code here if you go behind this this link. There's also a lot of free stuff. You don't have to buy anything from me. So you can check out my YouTube channels and my yeah, there's some downloads for learning languages. Yeah, this is just an image taken from the course. I do that for German, Chinese, Norwegian, and Swedish, and hopefully also for a few more languages in the future. And beyond that, I think we have time for questions now. If there's a question that comes afterwards, then feel free to send me an email, really old-fashioned, or feel free to join me at the book table that I have, because I have the essence of these language courses also as books, very traditional dead trees, printed paper, and I have a table opposite the registration desk in the main building, and you can find me there. But yeah, if after the event you want to contact me, then okay, let's look at the questions. I'm trying, oh no, I can read them here, that's really cool. Has the innen suffix become accepted in everyday German? I mostly hear it in the media. I also hear it mostly in the media. It's quite rare, I would say, that you hear that in everyday speech. You would hear it in interviews, so people who try to be a little bit progressive, they would use it in interviews, but then we're again in the media context. I hear it relatively rarely in everyday when you go to the baker, and you would not hear that very much. What do you think about neopronouns? Neopronouns are a great thing for people who want to use them. Of course, the problem is that if you have a pronoun that nobody knows of, then you always have to communicate that in a certain way. So that makes things a little bit difficult. What might happen is that we get gender-neutral pronouns that will become widely accepted. I think that is a route that could actually happen. We have il in French, we have hen in Norwegian. I'm not aware of anything in Czech, I'm not aware of anything in German, because we have a huge mess with the pronouns anyway. We use sie for one woman and also for a group in the plural. We use ihr as an object pronoun for a woman and also as a subject pronoun for a group in the plural. It's a huge mess, so we will not get any good neopronouns. But as I said, I think the most practicable way would be to have a completely neutral pronoun. In German, if he's the table, she's the door, and it is the window, how can we really say that grammatical gender refers to sociological gender at all? We can say it because a man is also he. So if it was not linked to biological sex or sociological gender at all, we would see languages where these pronouns also for the persons have absolutely nothing to do with the biological sex. So for example, we would say man, and that would be masculine, and then father, for example, would be feminine, and carpenter would be neutral, but that's not the case. So that's why also Mark Twain 150 years ago realized that it's weird that the girl is not she, yeah? So that's what I said before. Otherwise, we would also not call grammatical gender for masculine, feminine, neutral. We would call it for yellow, blue, and red, or something like that. German is infested with adjective endings, yes. Ist ein guter Mann, yes, ending in nominative. Ich sehe einen guten Mann, ending in accusative. Yeah, that's not a question, but it's true. Well, yes, yeah, you're good. Okay, you really paid attention. So the issue with the adjective only vanishes in German when we use the adjective in the predicative position. So if we want to say, ich bin alt, I am old, yeah, then the adjective ending vanishes, and it doesn't matter whether it's me, it doesn't matter whether I'm a guy, it doesn't matter whether you would say sie, it doesn't matter anymore. But if you use it in front of the noun that it's describing and use it with an indefinite article, I'm not sure if you're interested in this grammar details, but anyway, then you have to use the ending, and then the gender will show again. There is, yes. And in Czech there is even more. Have you heard of the non-binary onu pronoun in Polish, and which has its own declension system, past tense conjugation system? Any other examples? I'm not a Polish speaker, I don't know, unfortunately. What is Scapago, and why are they sponsoring this specific talk? Scapago is my company, and it's a little bit with Louis XIV, Le Roi c'est moi, so I'm the only one here who Scapago consists of, and I found this topic interesting, and that's why I sponsor my own talk. Language is shaping thinking versus thinking shaping languages. Isn't this a chicken and egg situation? Definitely it is. And definitely just as much as the chicken and egg phenomenon, we cannot really solve it. My personal opinion is that the direction here is very much from the thinking to the language, not the other way around. I'm not saying there is no connotation, but I hear that very often, especially in the polyglot community, that people say, oh, now that I speak Spanish, I can think in a different way. It hasn't happened to me. Like when I learned Norwegian, I still think as, maybe I'm stupid and I just can't think in one, I don't know, but I don't see this so much. So I would say it's much more that our thinking shapes the language, because we assign meanings to things we perceive, and these meanings just stay around and are there, and we don't really know what to do. If your dog is a Doberman, should you say it is Dober person? Yeah, that, you see that once you open this box of the Pandora, then it's really hard to stop. I showed you this example of the Christentum, yeah, Christianity in German, but Christen is the male plural of a Christian person. So should we call it Christinnentum? That would be more inclusive. In English, using the plural they is the most common way to refer to non-binary people. Are other languages using plurals? German does that because we have so little creativity that we say, hey, let's take the pronoun from English and then we can say they, and at least we don't have that difficulty with making a difference between they, a group in the plural, and they, a non-binary person, because we don't have the they in the language. So that works, but we can't pronounce the th, so it becomes they usually. Other languages, I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of a gender-neutral pronoun in Czech yet. I am aware of the French il, which is just a combination of il and elle, so just like the two genders merging. And hen is the Norwegian version. It's actually, they stole it from the Finnish language. So it came from Finnish to Swedish, from Swedish to Norwegian. Like you have han for a man, hun for a woman, and then hen if you want to be neutral. It's not that popular yet, but yeah, that might change, of course. Are you aware of the French stereotype of Scandinavian, are you aware of the French stereotype of Scandinavian men as less masculine because of gender equality? Maybe harder to work around gendered language culturally, I guess. Yes, so I know this French woman who worked in Oslo, and he said, if I want to feel as a woman, I have to go out with my French colleagues. But I'm not sure if that has something to do with the language very much, actually. So if all attempts to change the languages are not working, do you have an idea or suggestion that could work? Not really. I mean, I guess that languages will change when there is a suggestion out there that people accept readily. And at some point, this might happen, that somebody said, like with the gender-neutral pronouns, maybe something comes up in French, for example, the el, and people say, hey, that's cool, I don't have to say il ou elle, and it's like, I can just write el, it's practical, it's cool, and it becomes mainstream, and then we have it. I don't believe in top-down change. It's not possible, like, really to go and say, this is how we're going to talk from now on. Should gender-inclusive polyglots seek to learn less gendered languages when being inclusive is too difficult as a way to vote for inclusive communication? I mean, I believe you should learn the language that you want. I'm also not sure if you now start learning Estonian that the mainstream French voter would get your message. I'm very skeptical of this idea. I mean, I don't speak Finnish, I don't speak Estonian, I don't speak Hungarian, and I don't speak Turkish, but I think these four languages have no gender. I don't see that this has any relevance to the position, say, of women. I mean, the position of women in Turkey is very different from the position of women in Finland. We're back to the nurse problem, I think. It's not really, probably it doesn't matter that much. You were explaining the issues in Czech for woman and man wedding, but what if two men or two women marry each other? Yeah, exactly, that's a problem. So I don't know what to say. So I married a man, I don't know how I should say. I can give him a name, like he's like my spouse, masculine is Mangel. So this I can do. But when I want to say that I am married, I have no adjective. I coined my own and I use it for fun and people don't understand it. Do you feel that for the sake of inclusivity, the ease of the language for L2 speakers, especially immigrants, should be considered more discussing evolutions? Yeah, I do believe that it's a valid point also, because you can see if even the native speakers have issues with like using the correct endings and the correct terms and so on, then can you imagine what it means for people who are learning the languages? Yes, I do believe that it's a valid point. In German, the formal Sie, used for men and women, sounds feminine. Yes, right, I told you, like we're very uncreative when it comes to pronouns. We have to recycle them. I mean, that's why recycling was invented in Germany, probably, because we recycle pronouns for God knows how many functions. Is there any attempt to make a neutral formal address form? No. Me personally, I believe that the neutral or that the formal address in Germany is on the way out. I'm not sure that 30 years from now, I think we will not use Sie anymore. I live in Hamburg now much of the time, and I see the people in the stores, in the cafe, they say say du to me, even though I'm 44. They say du to my father, even though he's 91. It happens much more than, like 20 years ago, that would have been like really rude, and now it's becoming quite mainstream. I think that the Z is going to disappear. But it will take time, of course. It's not going to happen overnight. When church services use 16th century language rather than modern languages, is it appropriate or inappropriate to use gender-inclusive language? I guess that's a question you should ask a priest. Yeah. So I'm only aware of the situation in Germany where I would say that I grew up Catholic, so we used Latin for a very long time, and that we have church services in German was quite a new thing when I was a kid. So it was very modern German language. So I can't really say much about it. I would say that's really up to the church to discuss what the church thinks is more important and what the church thinks that God thinks about this issue. And this I don't know anything about. Germans like following rules. Could it be that Mädchen simply adheres to a general grammatical rule and there is no disrespect? Is there another example alike? Yes, so very good observation. I mean, when it comes to rules, German is not the only language that follows its own rules. You might be aware that most grammar, unfortunately, is to be obeyed in most languages. But yes, it's the diminutive, so Mädchen, if you want some etymology here, comes from Magd, and it's the diminutive of this word, and all the diminutives that have the chen ending will be of neutral grammatical gender. So whether that's disrespect or not is, of course, a question that is a little bit open, but it is definitely something that foreigners observe all the time when they learn German. Can a language truly ever be fully gender neutral? Even Esperanto has the ino endings, though of course it was a choice and could have not been made that way. I don't speak Esperanto, so I don't know. That's a bit bad that they made this choice 120 years ago and now they would like to change it, but naja, what can you do? I do believe there are fully gender-neutral languages. I'm not, as I said before, I'm not an Estonian, Finnish speaker or something, but I think these languages are really, they have one pronoun, they have no grammatical gender, they have, I hear sometimes Estonian or Finnish speakers, when they're not really good in English, they make these mistakes like my brother, she, blah, blah, blah. But then, of course, you have the word brother, so, but you might have a word sibling, and on top of it, I don't know. So, sorry?
There is a modern fix for Esperanto, in which there is icho as a masculine suffix and ipo for non-binary suffix.
Okay, so I have ipo as non-binary suffix for all the Esperantists who want to be more gender inclusive. In Norwegian and Swedish, when we say man, referring to humankind, like man spelar spel, what can we say instead? Nothing. It's like, that's a problem, yeah. There is no, yeah. Man spelar, vi spelar spel. Folk, in Norwegian you can say folk. Folk liker å spille spel. Okay, thank you very much.